What's up, guys? Brady here, coming at you with a Discography ranking for Beartooth in preparation for their upcoming album, Pure Ecstasy, releasing just tomorrow. Funny enough, this was not a ranking that I was planning on doing. Normally, I plan out these rankings months in advance of when the album's going to drop. But, I kind of thought about it, and this is actually a band that I have been following since their first album. And this upcoming one, Pure Ecstasy, is likely going to be one of the most divisive and talked about records of this year in terms of metal and metalcore. So please stay tuned for the review that I will be uploading of Pure Ecstasy, hopefully not long after it drops. The reality is Beartooth have been one of the most prominent bands in the metalcore mainstream since their first album, way back in 2014, 12 years ago now. It's worth noting, if you don't already know, that Beartooth originally started out as essentially the solo project of former Attack Attack member Caleb Shomo. He literally was playing all the instruments, doing all the writing on the first couple of albums. And it just kind of ended up evolving into the band like we know them now. Caleb's very vulnerable lyrics and loud, soft dynamics are things that I think really gained them a lot of fans early on. The big radio-friendly choruses also really helped them in that department too. And let's just get right into it with the album that I'm going to put at the number 5 spot here, which is their 4th album, Below, from 2021. If you're a Beartooth fan, I'm just going to get it out of there right away. I'm going to be critical of all of these records in some way or another. But even this record at the bottom, it's not a record that I would say is really bad or unlistenable at all. It just, to me, is the band's least explorative, and this being their 4th record, it's the most painfully familiar is the best way I would describe it. There's a few highlights, like Dominate has that kind of fun, quirky, bouncy main riff, and even some blast beats later on. No Return is passable, uses pretty much all clean vocals for the entire time, but it still has that heaviness to it. And The Answer is barely passable, because I actually really like some of the more unconventional groove choices on the drums and some of the more interesting melodies in this track that actually sounds very unique for the band. But the chorus of the track is a complete recycling of the Disease title track that they put out on the album before. The lyrics stick out on a track like Skin, which does come off very anthemic. But that's about it for my real positives from this record. I remember Devastation was a single, and just how boring is that song? I mean, with that rudimentary drum groove and guitar riff to the very generic chorus, Hell of It and I Won't Give It Up, bring in some of that punk influence, but again, in ways that feel more painfully familiar than explorative or like it's something fresh. These are songs that I listen to, and it makes me want to re-listen to their older material instead of this. Fed Up to, very vanilla song for the band, and also comes off blatantly recycled, this time, of Hated, which is one of their biggest songs from their second album, Aggressive. If you're a hardcore fan of the band, of course you're going to like this record, but for me, as someone who's always kind of came and went from them and picked out songs, this is their worst album. Top 3 tracks: Dominate, No Return, and Skin. Next up is Disease at the number 4 spot, the record that preceded Below. And I don't have much different to say about this record than I just did about Below. I do think this is one that at least has some kind of evolution in their sound, because it is a lot more melodic than their first 2 records. The punk energy really comes in, but in less of a vicious hardcore way and more of a fun, almost pop punk vibe in parts. I think the track Believe is a great instance of that. Even the whoa vocals in that song I think are tolerable, and the chorus has a very endearing main melody to it. You Never Know is very punky, and it has this attitude to it in the verses, but then the chorus again is just super catchy, which is something that definitely is one of this band's strengths. And the other real highlight on this record for me is the track Fire. I just like the hostility of this track. When that snare drum kicks in and Caleb's vocals just noticeably shift into more of that angrier sound, that sounds sick. It still has a pretty smooth shift into the melodic chorus, and it's maybe the most dynamic song on the record. But again, aside from those 3 tracks, the rest of the album is nowhere near that same quality. The band's raw aggression and primal energy that are exhibited in the more hardcore influenced tracks on the first 2 records noticeably peters out when you listen to tracks on here like Bad Listener and Manipulation. They're still heavy and in your face and aggressive, no pun intended, but there's just noticeably less staying power, I feel like, on these songs than there were on those more aggressive and in-your-face tracks on the first 2 records. Disease, the title track, is a song that starts out fairly well. I liked Caleb's melodic vocals when I first heard it, but it quickly turns into a very lethargic, just radio rock pandering attempt. That especially rears its head in the chorus for me. It sounds way too sluggish for me, and it just lacks the energy that I think it needed. It tries to do like that stop-start rhythm section thing and just doesn't quite get there because of how slow the tempo is. I think that's the issue with this one. And things are just, to me, noticeably less musically memorable on here. Again, Caleb's lyrics are really always a highlight on all these records. But yeah, top 3 tracks: You Never Know, Believe, and Fire.
Sink a little lower, get a little higher, finger on the trigger, scream, ready and fire. Sink a little lower, get a little...
Next up, number 3, going, I guess, down in reverse order, would be the band's second album, Aggressive. Right away, a noticeable step up from the bottom 2 records I just talked about. But even nowadays, like, I feel like there's only about half of the record that I've came back to at all. It is the beginning of just the watering down of the angry hardcore sound that took up most of the first record. And once again, being a clear step into more melodic direction, not quite as much as Disease, but still a lot more than the first record. The streamlining of the band's sound is kind of hit or miss on here, because I do think it works in parts. Like Hated is probably my favorite song from the band, period. It's super intense and full of energy. Caleb brings in the perfect balance lyrically and vocally of rage and emotion. The lyrics are very relatable, and I think the music itself matches that exact melodrama so well. It's no wonder to me that this is still one of the band's most popular songs and was such a successful single for them. But same thing goes for Loser, I would say, too, to a somewhat lesser extent. Again, it opens with a lot of energy and intensity, and then in the verses, Caleb almost channels his inner Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy in the first few lines there before he starts screaming. And again, very catchy anthemic chorus with some very just in your face and somewhat on the nose but efficient lyrics. A track like Always Dead shows that the band, or I guess just Caleb in this case now, was really still able to bring that same intensity that he did so well on the first record in the form of just a vicious, nonstop hardcore song. I also really like the closer, King of Anything, which is a drumless track, but it's very sludgy. It still has the energy to it, which is really impressive for not having drums. And it's just a very unique track for the band again. And I like how it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just over 2 minutes long. It comes and goes, but it's a really unique track. And then on the flip side, you have a track like the title track, which was the lead single. And I remember even at the time, and I still feel this way now, it's just a recycling of In Between, just with way less emotion and intensity and energy and catchiness and everything that makes that song good. Sick of Me, which is also a single, not a fan of that track. Just, again, to me, waters down the band's sound a little bit too much. And I would say the same thing also about Rock is Dead later in the record. And I haven't brought this up yet, but now is a good time to do it. The drums, like it's always especially bothered me in Beartooth's music, just how mechanical and rigid the drums are. There's just a noticeable lack of personality and groove even in the drum performances in a lot of these songs. And that might also have to do with the riff writing. For the musicians watching, I feel like the band's drums only have 2 different modes. There's fast, punky drum beats, which are very familiar for that style, and then just very rudimentary, again, rigid, constant 8th notes, constant 16th notes, and just not a whole lot of variation rhythmically. Rock is Dead, the drums on that song are exactly what I'm talking about for that latter point. It just sounds so robotic, and so many of the same grooves keep getting used on these songs. It especially wears on you listening to this full album at once. But definitely a step up from the bottom 2 records I just talked about, and not a bad record overall. Top 3 tracks I'll give to Always Dead, Loser, and of course Hated.
Who need to be hated for being who you are? And be a big target for all the insecure.
At the number 2 spot, I'm going to give it to their last album, The Surface. I'll get it out there right away. The reason this album is so high is because it was finally the record that saw them switching things up. And I don't necessarily mean musically, because like I said, they did display a few like differences stylistically in some of their past albums. I mean in this album's overall mood and aura. 4 albums straight of like that same exact mood of just pure angst and nothing else gets to be pretty tiring when you keep doing it over and over. And I think that is something that wears down on me with those 2 through 4 span records. But this record's different. And for me, the tone shift really paid off. It's definitely far from perfect. There's still a handful of tracks that I don't like. Like What's Killing You kind of bores me. The Better Me, the song they did with Hardy, definitely not into that one. But the radiance and positive energy on tracks like Might Love Myself and I Was Alive are great. Like, the tracks really do feel alive, and you feel the joy that Caleb delivers when he sings. In a way, he almost delivers that same joy on the more aggressive cuts on here, like Doubt Me, which does have those same kind of rigid drum ideas, but the tempo is a bit faster, and it just delivers the energy a bit more efficiently. And like I said, the mood shift and the tone shift on this song definitely helps it. Riptide is really fun. Sunshine too, fun track that has a lot of cool like mood shifts. I especially love that really drastic one when that more melodic acoustic driven part kicks in. And Look the Other Way, which uses some acoustic guitar and is probably the band's most melodic song to date, is maybe the best song on the record. The raw lyrics come back, but it's in a way that feels a lot more intimate as opposed to just drowning you in angst. Again, not perfect, but a fun record, and one that sees the band pulling off a pretty drastic overall tone shift. Top 3 tracks: Look the Other Way, Sunshine, and Might Love Myself.
Sunshine that would finally show. I might die if I stay in this cold.
So that does mean that my maybe somewhat predictable pick for the band's best album is their 2014 debut, Disgusting. The album that can best be described as just Caleb Shomo pouring his soul out in the studio. Lyrically, it's their best and their most raw and their most vulnerable up to this point. I mean, maybe that'll change tomorrow. We'll see. But the prominent hardcore punk edge that this album has is still what sets itself apart from even their next record, which was still one of their heavier ones. Relapsing, Ignorance is Bliss, and I Have a Problem is definitely the best 3-track run in that regard on the record. But the more good cop, bad cop style songs on here, like, of course, In Between, which is the band's most successful single on this album, I believe. And also, of course, The Lines and Beaten in Lips. They have the hostility, but those choruses are just so damn catchy. And Caleb can also bring the melody in more interesting ways on a track like One More. It's hard being the guy that just wants a band to go back to the sound on their first record. I really don't like being that guy, but it's hard to argue this being their best album. Top 3 tracks: In Between, Ignorance is Bliss, and Beaten in Lips.
Up on the mountain, I see down below. It's easy to lose yourself, I know. Can't hear what you're shouting.
Of course, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to hit subscribe and stay tuned for my review of Pure Ecstasy shortly after it drops, like I mentioned. Comment below, how would you rank Beartooth albums, and what are your thoughts on their discography? Maybe some of your favorite songs. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.